The microphone wasn't on.
Oh my God, there you are. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Am I loud in Europe?
Could be.
All right. So anyway, so let me just start by saying you don't need a lot of gear to have fun in a radio contest. You can do it with a 7300 and a wire in a tree. And so that's kind of the way I pitched this particular presentation, as if I was sitting in that kind of a station, what could I do? And that's kind of what I want you to, walk away with. It's a little confusing, but okay. There it goes. Okay. So let me make that point really clear. So you see the station on the left. There's a C31XR JK at the top, one at the bottom. They can be run together in phase. In between is a 4-element 40, 404C from JK. And on the right, if you look really closely, you can see maybe a ribbon line going up to a dipole antenna. Okay? So which do you think, which station had the higher score? CQ Worldwide, CW 2023. Yes, of course, you knew this was coming. Whoop, this went too fast. So that's my score on the left. That's John Doerr, K1AR score on the right. He blew me away. Okay, John has a dipole at 70 feet fed by open wire line. It's a multi-band dipole. Yes, he's got an amplifier, but John is one of the best in the world. And that's what this is really about. It's not about big antennas and big stations. It's about operating skill. And John's got it in spades. He is excellent. Okay? And anybody in this room really can develop, if you want to, that skill. It takes time, takes practice, but it's a skill set. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through some contesting basics, like why should I do this? What do I need to do it? What do I do sitting in front of my radio? By the way, let me ask one more question. How many have HF radios? Great. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to go through some basics, and then I'll talk about the contest that's coming up in 2 weeks exactly from today, CQ Worldwide DX Phone. Many ways to participate in this contest. I don't know if you've been watching, the Essence Solar Flux indexes and, get an idea of what the sun is doing up there for HF propagation, but right now it's fabulous. It's the best that it can get. Trust me. Now, yeah, I know the A index was 96 today, but that's we had a storm, which you might have actually seen last night. There was an aurora. So it kind of disturbed propagation. But I believe that by the time we get around to 2 weeks from now, we'll be in pretty good shape. So 10 meters will be flying. Trust me. And it's always good to set a goal in this, even if you're getting into this for the first time. So what might be a reasonable goal? I actually think you can do DXCC in a weekend. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through that. But you can set something lesser. Maybe you're trying to fill out worked all continents. They'll all be on. Maybe you're trying to, do DXCC and work some banned countries. There'll be tons of that. Okay, so set some goals for yourself. All right, so some basics. It's a learning experience. You will learn HF propagation. if you do 24 hours solid in this contest, you will understand what bands are open to what parts of the world at any time of day. And that's cool. You will improve your operating technique. Trust me. Make a, get serious about it. Make some contacts, make some more, keep going, keep going. You'll get the rhythm, you'll figure this out. And in the CW contest, you will, how many want to improve their CW proficiency? Okay, there are a few of you here. CW contest is absolutely the best way to do that. There's a contest called sweepstakes, CW, ARRL. And the exchange is a serial number, a precedence, which is either A, B, or U, or M, your call, the two numbers of the year you were first licensed, and what's the last? Oh, your ARRL section. That's the exchange. That's what you have to send and what you have to receive. And if your, let's say, CW speed is like 15 words a minute, maybe 20 words a minute, at the beginning of that contest, you will end it at 30 words a minute. Trust me. Okay, I talked about filling out needed countries for DXEC, but, it's something to do with your HF radio. I mean, you can tune down to the CW band in any day, any evening, and not find a whole lot going on. I mean, it's kind of depressing, and it's somewhat the same way on the, on the phone bands. But you come along to a weekend, and there's a lot of activity, and it's usually around a contest. So it's something really to do with your radio. The real point is having fun. I enjoy this. And if you get into it, you could too. So what do you need? Obviously an HF radio. At least one multi-band capable antenna, as I demonstrated to you. Logging software is pretty much essential these days, unless you want to handwrite everything. And, okay, if you want to, that's fine. But you got to send in a handwritten log, and it's just, why? I mean, why go through that? I mean, you all have PCs, right? You can all attach your PC to a radio, yeah, right? You can do that. You can download N1MM, bring it up, attach your radio, and off you go. N1MM is free, and it's a great logger program. You can use WriteLog. There are a couple other ones out there, but the most popular is N1MM. If you're in a CW contest, an automatic here is almost essential, I think, really. And you can attach it to N1MM, and you can send from the keyboard with F keys, and makes things way simpler. Okay, but there are some nice to haves. A tribander is a thing to have for a contest. Dipole on 40 meters or something better is a nice thing to have for 40. Inverted Ls for 80 and 160 work, particularly on 160 if you got enough radials. And an amplifier helps too, by the way. You probably know that. But that's pretty much it. So what do you do? Well, the first thing you want to do, it says my internet connection is, okay. Before you get into any contest, the first thing you have to do is absolutely mandatory is read the rules. Right? Because you'll figure out, what do I say? What do I do? What category do I want to get in? What's the exchange? There's always an exchange of information. It's very quick, but you got to do it. So what do you say? So usually the contest sponsor website will have the rules, and there's the WA7 BNM contest calendar, if some of you are familiar with that, okay? Google WA7 BNM contest calendar, it will come up. It will show you all of the contest that this guy knows about for that week, and the next week, and the next month, and for the rest of the year. I mean, it's all there. So what do you do? Hopefully you can read this. So every contact, as I think I mentioned, requires a successful exchange of information to be entered into the log. Okay, so in CQ Worldwide, it is a signal report, and for phone it's 59, and it's always 59. Okay, even though the guy at the other end might be S3, it's 59. Okay, just keep that in mind. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a CQ zone. So I'll show you a CQ zone map in a little bit. Okay, and every zone has a number from 1 to 40. And so if I am talking to AP5A, AP5A is going to send me 598 because he's in zone 8, and I'm going to send him 595 because I'm in zone 5. Okay? So there are two basic modes of operating in a contest. One is referred to as search and pounce, S&P. And that's essentially you just spin the dial. You're looking for stations to work. You find one, dump your call in, exchange, get the exchange back, put them in the log, go to the next one up the dial or next one down the dial or wherever you want to go. But you're turning the knob trying to find people to put in the log. Okay? The other is running. Okay? And this is where you find a clear frequency, you park on it and call CQ. And hopefully somebody comes back and you have an exchange with them. You put them in the log and you call CQ again. And hopefully somebody else comes back and you just keep going, keep going, keep going. So when you're in S&P mode, what are you doing? You're tuning across the stations that are running, right? Find one, they say QRZ, you dump your call in. Okay, the next guy, QRZ, he dumps his call in, right? And he keeps going and going. You can do that too. You don't have to be a DX station to do this. And we'll talk about this a little bit. But in S&P mode, it's important not to spend a lot of time in a pileup. So you you find a station, dump your call in, he comes back to somebody else. You dump your call in again, he comes back to somebody else. You keep doing that for about 5 minutes, and oh man, why am I doing this? Right? So don't. And I'll explain to you what you can do in a little bit when you reach that point. Okay? Just don't do that. Tune away, come back later. N1MM keeps sort of track of, what stations are where on a band map. You can always come back to them. And the other thing you can do in S&P, which will help you avoid pileups, is instead of starting at the bottom of the band, so typically what people will do when they're in S&P mode, they'll get on, like, say, 20, and they'll start on 14,150, and they'll work their way up. And I'll talk to this guy, and then this guy, and then this guy, and you keep going up. The only problem with doing that is that the guys at the bottom of the band are very busy. That's where the real pileups are, typically. That's where the noise is, right? It's tough down there. Go up to the other end of the band, and there's lots more room, particularly at 10. You can tune a little bit, find somebody, tune down a little more, find somebody. They're kind of sitting out there in the clear, and they're much easier to work because there aren't so many people trying to work them. Okay? So save yourself some time. And the other thing you can do, one other advantage of doing this is something that I learned when I was down at PJ2T in Curacao. So I was down there a few years ago, and the antenna, when you point it at Europe, looks into a hill, which is not very good. And so running at PG2T is, at the time anyway, was kind of a challenge running to Europe. And I discovered that what I had to do was go all the way up to the band to find a clear spot where Europe could actually hear me. And once I got spotted, then things started. But here's the thing. I'm not alone with that, or I wasn't. Other guys were just getting on the band. They're trying to find a run frequency. I swear to you, they'll just gravitate to the other end of the band, find a clear spot. So what do? You find all those guys, right? Because you have a much better shot at working them without a pop than you would on the other end of the band. Quick tip. So running. And you're probably going to be able to do this, even with a modest station on 10 meters, because there's all kinds of room in 10, right? It's from what, 28,350 all the way up to 2,900. And you get on 10 meters 2 weeks from now, you will find that space full of signals. So find a run frequency and try calling a CQ. In the morning to Europe, you might be pleasantly surprised at what happens. You'll start getting calls back, I think. You can do that on 10, absolutely. You can do that on 15, so later in the morning when the band's open to Europe. 20 is hard because there's not really enough space. 20 is kind of compressed and it's just noisy. And it's almost impossible to do for a 40 sideband. You can do it on 40 CW, but it's tough on the lower bands. Okay? But keep in mind, you could, set up and run stations. Even Steve, with his situation on 10. Okay? So probably spent too much time on that. Anyway, so let's talk specifically about CQ Worldwide DX phone. October 26, 27, 48 hours continuous. Starts at 0 Zulu on the 26th, which is Friday night at about this time. And all HF band, 60 through 10. And just keep in mind that all bands in CQ Worldwide are like separate little contests, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the first thing you want to try to figure out is what category you want to be in if you're going to do this, and I strongly suggest you do. Most of you will probably be single op, but maybe you can have a friend over, okay, and do a multi-op thing where, let's say you're at the radio for a certain period of time, you go to sleep, your friend takes over, he goes for a certain period of time, he goes to sleep, you get back on the radio, okay? So any situation where you've got more than one operator is a multi-op. All the way up to these big unlimited multi-operator stations that, have 6, stations or 6 radio setups, and, they're all bands and they're going 48 hours and all that stuff. Assisted versus unassisted. So you're all familiar, I think, with packet spotting, packet radio, yeah? Telnet clusters. So I use K1EU, right? And so you bring one N1MM up and you hit the Telnet window and it'll connect to, the spotting network. And then you hit the band map button and the band map starts populating with all these calls that get spotted, okay? You are running an assisted mode when you do that. You're using the spotting network to assist you in making contacts. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can just sit there with your radio, your log, and go. That's unassisted. And some guys think that's real, man. Anyway. K1DG says packet is the devil, but well, the thing is that, after an hour of packet spots, right? Your bandmass full, you just sit there pointing and clicking. You're not tuning the band really anymore. You're just point and shoot. And sometimes you miss things when you do that. So anyway, there are 3 power categories. High power, which is greater than 100 up to 1500 watts. Low power, which is between 5 and 100, and QRP. And these are all separate categories, by the way. Right? Assisted, unassisted, power, whatever. And now they have some overlay categories. So there's a classic overlay. So if you only want to spend 24 hours, you're only going to use run radio. I use 2, but most people use 1. And no assistance, that's the classic. If you were first licensed less than 3 years before the contest date, that's a rookie category, separate category. Youth is 25 years old or younger. And there's something called Explorer that I don't quite understand, but it has something to do with, fooling around with new technology. Anyway, but this is another place where reading the rules before the contest starts is mandatory. You want to figure out, because N1MM will ask you, right, a bunch of questions, are you assisted, unassisted? What's your power? So you want to understand, because, they'll populate your log in the particular category for the particular category you choose. So you want to understand this before you start. All right, so how do you score points? I'm sorry, I've made an eye chart with this, but basically, obviously, you score points by working guides. You get 3 points out of continent for each QSO. You get 2 points for, I don't know. The rest of this QSO point thing gets confusing to me, honestly. Most of the contacts you're going to make are through points, right? So that's the first element of scoring. The second element of scoring is what's referred to as a multiplier. In CQ Worldwide, there are 2 ways to get multipliers. One is the CQ zone map, right? So each zone is a separate multiplier per band, The other is the country, the DXCC country list. And that's another multiplier, separate multiplier per band. So you have 2 multipliers per band that, are available, right? And so what you do is you take your score, all the QSO points that you've got, and multiply that by the total multipliers, and that's your final score. That's how scoring works. This is the zone map. Look closely, you'll see we're in zone 5. Okay? Most of what you're going to probably work in a contest like this is zone 14 and 15. And probably, quite a bit of zone 16, which is a little bit controversial, but this year you'll see a lot of them. Easier zones are the ones like 7, 9, 8, 10, 11 down in South America. You just point your antenna south. Tune 10, you'll work them all. They'll all be there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about propagation. I took a look at the predicted solar flux number for the contest weekend. It's supposed to be 20 or 200. The A index is supposed to be 5, which is fabulous. So 10 meters actually could be the go-to band. There's going to be lots of room, like I said. Lower antennas will play 30 to 50 feet. Okay, that's between 30 and 60 feet, 10 meters is a good height. Okay. Polar path and long path openings. So what do I mean by polar path? I mean, from us, polar path is over the North Pole to Central Asia, to Japan, to, Southeast Asia, that part of the world. That will be open on 10. I've heard it, trust me. And even long path openings. So there was a long, back up a second. What is a long path open? It's the opposite of the short path opening. So instead of going to Japan over the northwest, over the pole to the northwest, you go the opposite direction. You go southeast and up. Okay? That's the signal propagation, which is possible on 40 in the afternoon. Trust me, works. So 10 meters is going to be a place that you really want to focus on. 15 is another place. This will be around the world propagation, and maybe all day and all night. It's absolutely a go-to band for Europe and Africa from the early AM all the way to about 4 p.m. local. You will be able to work East Asia, sort of middle morning to late morning, and then once again later in the evening. It'll open to Pacific in the mid-afternoon, and South America should be there for the duration of the contest, and the Caribbean on 15. 20 could also be open around the clock, and more or less the same propagation as 15. But as I mentioned, there's just, there's not as much room, okay? And having higher antennas helps on 20, okay? So if you really don't want to spend a lot of time on 20, that might be okay. The time actually the time in the contest you might really think about doing 20 is not Saturday, but Sunday. Okay, and so here's what happens in a typical contest. DX stations will all line up and down the bands, and people start working them. At the beginning of the contest, everybody is a multiplier for everybody else, right? So everybody's pounding away, trying, on pileups, trying to break through, it's just every DX station is that can run a run frequency or hold a run frequency is going to be extremely busy. And, you could be pounding away, trying to get through to them. My first contest was in 1974. I had a dry bander at 50 feet, tower stuck to the side of my house in Amherst. I had an SB102 that I built with a little one-tube amplifier that was also Heathkit's. And it was ARRL-CW, and I had a little keyer, a little electronic keyer that I had to hang on to in order to keep it from moving around the table. And the first thing I did on Friday night was I turned the antenna south, and I tried to work all the South Americans in the Caribbean station. And so was everybody else. And if I worked maybe 15 of those stations in 3 hours, I was doing something. You just, you can beat your head against the wall trying to do that. What I didn't know, or what I didn't sort of realize, is that Saturday or Sunday afternoon, all those stations would be there, and they would all be begging for QSOs because everybody had worked them, right? And I could have hit them with 10 watts, and they probably heard me. Okay, so keep that in mind. The stations, particularly in the Caribbean and South America, they're going to be there. The big stations in Europe, they're going to be there. Okay, throughout. Low bands be more difficult. At this time in the solar cycle, low bands tend to get noisier. Okay, when the high bands are active, the low bands tend to get noisy. When the high flat, then the low bands get quieter, and that's really where the action is. So 6 years from now, this will be a low band contest, but now it's a high band contest. You may want to focus your antenna or your activity on the low bands for Saturday night, because there's this kind of, in CQ Worldwide, there's this Europe works Europe phenomenon, okay? So what happens Friday night in Europe, everybody works with everybody else in Europe, because remember, they're all separate countries, right? And, you're familiar with 40 or 80, the local stations come in really loud, right? And so that's what it's like over there. It's hard to break through. They're all 20 over 9. And, you know, you're S9 maybe. And it can be hard. So wait for Saturday night. That's when all that stuff in Europe is gone. And they're all looking for US stations to work. So it's much easier on the low bands Saturday night. And beware of when you get enhanced propagation, okay, on the low bands. There are 2 points in time. One is European sunrise, right? So that's the time you want to be on like 160. Working Europe is European sunrise, thing with 80, and the same thing with 40. That's about 0200 Zulu. Or I'm sorry, 0200 local time, right? So 2 in the morning to about 4 in the morning at the latest. So somewhere between 1:30 and 3:30, okay, is going to be European sunrise, depending on what part of Europe, East Europe, Western Europe, whatever. The other time is our sunrise. That's a great time to be on the low band, okay? Because what you got is propagation to the Pacific, propagation to JA, you know, propagation to South America. There's a lot of stuff going on the low bands at sunrise. And you even get this gray line effect. You familiar with gray line? So gray line is the perimeter between night and day. It's this sort of, you know, dawn, right? And what happens is signals propagate along that line. It's weird. It's like a tunnel, right? And so you can work VK on 160 at this time, Australia. You know, because this actually works. And on 40, for a sideband, what'll happen is a lot of the European stations, because they can't really compete up in the phone band, the US phone band, let's say from 7,130 to up to 7,200, what they'll do is they'll go down to their phone, you know, their phone band goes all the way down to like 7040, something like that. And so they'll find a space in between like 7080 and 740 to call CQ. And they will say, I'm listening to this frequency and 7247, right? And so you tune 7247 and work them split. That happens all the time on 40. Okay, to a lesser extent on 80, but absolutely on 40. Okay. So this is new. Rudy just put this up N2WQ about 2 weeks ago. You can see, I put the website address here. This is a real-time propagation report. Okay, so what Rudy's done is he's taken FT4, FT8 spots that he could, you know, that his station can see, if you will, all right, and he compiles a heat map from that, which is run in real time. So depending on what time you're at, you can look at this and say, this was done at about 4:30 in the afternoon, right? And you can see that, you know, the hot bands, okay, to different parts of the world are in red. So you can see, for example, zone 14, which is Europe, is hot on 20 and 15, as it should be. That's the way it works. You know, so you can get this, you put this up on a separate computer, and if you're trying to figure out what band you know, you might be most effective on, you can take a look at this, right? I just really love this. I haven't used it yet because it's only been around for 2 weeks, but it just saves a lot of time trying to figure out, because in your contest, you're trying to figure out, okay, I can't run any more in this band, where should I go, right? And sometimes you have to tune around a little bit to try to figure out, oh, geez, you know, is that active? Is that hot? I mean, a lot of guys wait. We'll start the contest morning on 20, early morning. Sun's just starting to come up, and start running Europe. And then it's a question of when do you move to 15? Because the adage is you're always on the highest band that's open. Okay? So once you're done with 20, oh, you want to move to 15, but you don't want to move too soon. You want to move it, you try to want to move just at the right time. And the same thing with 10 meters, okay? And so this kind of helps you with that. But it also shows you openings that you might not be aware of. So if you look down at zone 24 on 15 meters, zone 24 is China, eastern China. There's an opening. Wow. One of the things that CQ Worldwide does is it gets everybody on. So it's not like the band's open, but you never know it because nobody's there, right? In this contest, there are people there. So let's talk about how you might work DXCC in a weekend. Okay, and so we're going to do this by the numbers. So you can start with Europe. Okay, there are 60 possible countries in Europe. Okay, they're only an ocean away. They'll be all over 10 and 15, up and down the band. They'll be easy. You'll probably be able to work, I think, 50 of them, believe it or not. So that's that's half your goal. Okay, the Caribbean. This on Sunday afternoon, the Caribbean is duck soup. Okay, there are a lot of multi-stations that go to the Caribbean, set up shop. They're on all 48 hours of the contest. And like I say, by Sunday afternoon, they're begging for contact. All right. I don't care if you're an S1.5, you're in the log. You're laughing. So field day. Okay. I operated Steve's station at field day. Okay. Steve had a 7300 and a little antenna that was, I don't know, somewhere out there. Right. And I'm on 15 in the evening. You know, it's just the sun's just going down. It's 15. I'm on 15 meters and I hear KP2A. So, oh, what the heck? I'll call him, see if I can get him. And he comes right back. Oh, that's cool. KP2A. Wow. And I got 40 watts to this. Anyway, so I just, you know, in field day, you can't ask for, you don't get a signal report. So I actually asked for a signal report. He said, oh, you're at 3. Okay, well, at least you hear me, right? I'm telling you, these guys on Sunday afternoon, if you're asked, like I say, ask one, you're in the log. Okay. So there are at least 10 in the Caribbean, another 10 in South Central America. You know, the LUs are a little harder. Argentina, CE, Chile, is a little bit harder, but anything north of that is usually pretty easy. Brazil will be up and down 10 meters, up and down. Sort of the same thing with Argentina. So Pacific, VK, you should be able to work VK. Australia, you should be able to work New Zealand, you should be able to work Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii is a separate country in this contest. KL7, and a few more. There's a YJ0 something something that's a multi-multi operation in Vanuatu. You should be able to work, you know, because they're going to be on all bands looking for anybody they can find. And the other place you can go to find possible stations to work, at least to get in your mind, you know they're in the contest, is the NG3X page. Okay, so NG3X keeps track of announced DX positions. And he's got a separate section on CQ Worldwide phone. And there are, at the last count, there were 27 that he had. So you ought to, I think, probably be able to pick off another 20 out of that, and you're at 100. Okay? And I think it's doable. So, some tips on pileups, how to handle them. Timing is everything in a pileup. So what'll happen is DX station will say, CQ, I'm AP5A, over. And everybody will call. And they'll call once. And maybe they'll call twice. And maybe the DX station will, after 2 of those iterations, will pick out a call out of the multitude. Some people are better than others at this. 8P5A will do 5, 6 contacts a minute, because he can just pick them up, roll them, roll them, roll them. But he's sort of the one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the operator on the other end that you're trying to get that just hears mush and is just waiting for some way to pick out a call. And so the way that a lot of guys try to do this is time your call when nobody else is calling or very few other people is calling. And the way to do that is to listen to the pileup before you start getting involved. So listen to the rhythm of the person on the other end, okay? How long does it take for him to come back to somebody, right? And sort of start figuring out when you're going to be able to dump your call in at a point where he's actually going to hear it, okay? Pileups get, and I've sort of talked about this already, but pileups get smaller as the contest progresses. Why? Because everybody's worked everybody at this point, or almost, right? And so, like I say, the DX stations that are allowed, any part of the world, you know, a lot of the people in the contest will have worked them by then. So pileups tend to boil down, okay, as the contest goes on. So any DX station that gets spotted, so, you know, on the spotting network, the phenomenon is that somebody will see it as new, they'll click on it and call, right? And so everybody that's using a spotting network, you know, and sees it, let's say a new multiplier for the first time, will click on it and call. And the first 15 or 20 minutes, 30 minutes after a DX station is spotted can be absolute bedlam. Okay, so you know that. Wait. All right. Avoid pilots, but and I've already talked about this by tuning the dial, start at the top of the band and the other, and try to avoid just chasing cluster spots because everybody else is doing that. You can do that too, okay? But don't just do that. And then there's the kind of the what's your call phenomenon. And this drives me crazy, right? So you find a DX station and there's all kinds of people calling and the DX station will say WA1EY 5909, and go on and work the next guy, and go on and work the next guy, go on and work the next guy. For the next 5 minutes, he goes on working the next guy, the next guy, the next guy, and you're saying, wait a minute, who is this guy? What's your call? Wait a minute, you haven't sent your call yet. This happens all the time. Drives me crazy. But you have a couple of things going for you. If you're assisted, it might have been spotted, and you might be able to pick it up with that bait. But sooner or later, somebody says, what's your call? You know, and he'll finally give the call. But hey, it happens. But, you know, sort of a final tip is don't bang your head against the wall. It hurts. Right? Don't sit in a pile up and keep it's negative. It makes you feel negative. God, I can't do this. Oh, my station sucks. Oh, I need a new antenna. Why am I doing it? Don't do that. Don't do that. Do anything else. You know, you're a pilot, you spend 5 minutes, you haven't got through, go somewhere else. Work anybody. I don't care. Just have a positive experience, right? This is the kind of thing that we can kind of turn you off about contesting. I can't do this. No, you can't. Just have a positive experience, have fun. So here's some resources. There's contest universities that happen at Dayton, and the presentations are online. Amateur Radio Contesting for Beginners by Doug Grant, K1DG. ARRL Bookstore is out of it, but Amazon apparently has some. Okay, and it's good. I mean, Doug's great. I've also already mentioned WA7PNM NG3 X Contest the Expedition page. I am a member of the Yankee Clipper Contest Club, and it's a great resource. So if you really want to get into this, take a look at joining it. And there are lots of propagation charts out there, but you know, the one I think I like is the one that Rudy's just done by N2WQ. So, any questions? Tennis.
Declare a band if you want to be competitive on a band. What are the operating modes you declare up front?
Well, okay. So to answer your first question, first, if you want, you can enter the contest as a single band entry. Okay. So let's say this contest, I want to do 10 meters, period. I'm going to do. Okay. And so you can enter the contest as a contestant for 10 meters only. Okay. And same thing with any other band. Okay. All right. What was the other question?
Yeah. So, well, is there advantage in declaring the band?
No,
Yeah.
not
there isn't.
necessarily. I mean, there are separate awards for each band. Okay.
Right. So the main declaration up front is, single op, one radio, single op, two radios, multi-ops, that type of thing.
Yes.
Those are the critical declarations you make up front,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
All right. So here's a more difficult question, and it's about a weird band, but I happen to like it. So let's just say you wake up tomorrow, you decide that for this contest, you want to win 160. Now
Where is
and
that
then-
thing that said,
don't
don't
get
beat your
to
head
ask the
against the
question.
wall?
I get to ask the question. You think hard about how would I be the best performer on 160 in this contest in 2 weeks? I'm fascinated to hear. It includes making adjustments to your stations. I think you
okay.
touched on what you would do, right?
All
in
right.
terms of
So here, if that was my challenge, here's what I do. You want to hit the band at sunset. Okay. So let's say you start on Friday. Okay. And the band might be open because it's sundown, and there will be Europeans. But the problem is on 160 that Europe works Europe. Okay, and that's pretty much what you're going to find if you can hear them. Okay. South America will start showing up at around, in the Caribbean around 11 in the evening. A lot of guys down there hit 160 at midnight, okay, Eastern time, and will check, work as many stations as they can, and then go off somewhere else. And they'll come back in 30 minutes, maybe, or the next hour, on the hour, and work as many sticks, and then they'll go back to 80, okay? So that's how you sort of play 160 until you hit European sunrise, okay, which is about 1:30 in the morning. And then you can start working Europeans. Now, they're not going to be loud, okay? So understand that. You need typically like a beverage antenna to hear them really well, okay? And they'll have beverage antennas too, so they're going to be listening for you. But that's the time when you want to be, looking for Europe, is at European sunrise. All right, so Europe sort of dies down at around, let's say, 3 o'clock in the morning. So what do? So you look for cage 6. Cage 7A or cage 7X is always on, so you can pick up Hawaii. Wait a little while longer. You may be able to pick up a couple of Pacific stations. And then at sunrise, you've got VKZL. And that's the way I play.
Cool. One more question. Thanks, Bill, for the mic. So the beverage you're going to use to listen, if you had whatever you could build between now and 2 weeks from now for 160 to get your signal in better, what would you use for an antenna?
Inverted L. Okay, so let me just, for those of you who may not know what I'm talking about, an inverted L is a sort of a vertical and horizontal. So what you do is it's like having a 160 vertical, except halfway up you bend it over. Okay, so what I do is I take a spider beam pole, okay, lightweight, goes up about 60 feet, 70 feet. I wrap a wire down, and then the rest of it I hang out into a tree. And then I put radials out underneath it. It is very effective. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
John, do you have to declare the use of multiple antennas, or is that just completely open?
Declare the use of,
Multiple antennas.
no. You have to declare the use of multiple radios, though. But that's only for the classic overlay category, right? So if I just get in the contest, let's say I'm single op, high power, okay, unassisted, I use many radios as I want. But I mean, literally, physically, you could probably, two's enough. I mean, you got one in each ear, you know, you don't have an ear back here. So, you know, it gets kind of hard with more. But I mean, guys try, trust me. But SO2R is an operating mode, but it's not part of a category.
Thank you, sir. I thought of another question. I used to love to watch when the contest results come out, how many people participated. And I haven't looked at those reports in a long time. So when this worldwide contest is done, what do you think you're going to see for number of logs that came in for code, number of logs that came in for, well, it's a sideband. I'm sorry. So it's a sideband thing.
I'm
So-
sorry, I'm going to guess something like 12,000.
Okay. And how many of those are domestic?
40%, 50%. Right? I mean, you know, CQ Worldwide is an international contest. You know, they like it overseas because they're the ones that win, right? Yeah, you want to win this contest, go somewhere else. Don't do it from here. Trust me. Yes.
For those of us that are try to avoid using any Microsoft product, any other logging program since NM is
Yes.
Does own-
Well, nah.
Like, for example,
there's a version, there's a Linux version.
yeah, because I was gonna say, for example, I used to like before I moved, I had my 7300 running off of a Raspberry Pi, so that way I could go sit on the couch and operate my radio from the
Yeah.
couch.
Yep. Yeah, there's a Linux version, and if you're an Apple user, there's something called Skookum Logger that was written by K1GQ. It's a little bit more complicated, but you can use an Apple in a contest. Any other? Okay.
Any questions online real quick? Seeing any. All right, very good. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, John.
Thanks, guys.
Hopefully we all, oh, you're still mic'd up, John.
I'm going to use it in the contest.
Before you do a bathroom break or something. And then the